but I do appreciate you guys showing up. This is something that we don't get to do very often with a group of firefighters about learning and cutting on new cars. Without the help of the NABC, without the help of Elite Auto Body, the insurance companies for helping us out, dealerships bringing out cars and stuff, truly none of this would be possible at all. But it gives you guys the knowledge to be able to see cars here and learn about them and make mistakes before you go out on an accident scene and you have people behind you screaming at you, telling you to hurry up. You got people in the car telling you to scream at you, telling you to hurry up. Your mindset's high, everything's running. So this is a place to help you learn how to cut up these cars, because cutting these newer cars is not like going out and cutting a 1990 Cutlass. Okay, it's just not even close to being the same. So this is Adam Rich. He's been in Virginia Beach Fire Department now for I don't know how many years. I think he's a captain. He just got promoted this year. So Adam, you want to tell a little bit about yourself?
I live in Suffolk, so a couple hours from here, and then work in Virginia Beach, so another maybe half hour away or so, about as far east as I can go. I've been there 12, 13 years, had a great time, spent time down at the resort part of the city, and now I'm kind of in the downtown area. So just, again, so thankful to be here. I love this stuff, so very excited to go through this stuff with you guys.
I would also like to just briefly thank Mike Gray. Where are you, Mike? He's the genius behind the tarp and the wood on the floor, so we have an easy cleanup. We don't have glass, have to worry about anything like that. This is something he created, and I think it works great. Thank you.
I'm going to get Mike to come up here and talk about some structure too, and how he has seen cars have changed, how the industry is changing, how cars are made, crumple zones, different things like that. So first, I want to point out on some of these vehicles, I was able to get printouts through a program that we have access to. If you can take the make and model, even the year, into it's called ModiTech. It's a program that you can quickly get on an app on your phone and pull it up. It is expensive, but if you have it on a tablet, you can come up and see the car, even a VIN number or whatever, and put it into the system. It basically pulls up where your hardened steels are. It pulls up where your airbags are. It pulls out where your cylinders are for your airbags, where your batteries are, your battery cables are run. And it puts out where all your needed pertinent information at that time is. So it's very helpful. So I went ahead and got some of those to be taped to the hood of the vehicle. So when you guys go up to these vehicles, you can look at the hood and see where that stuff is before we get started. And remember, when we get into it, we always want to peek and pry to see where those cylinders are and airbags and things like that. A couple basic things. If you walk up to a car, say like this one right here, the Hyundai, if you peek and peel, and you see that there's an airbag in the roof and it hasn't been cut yet or it hasn't been blown, you can take your knife and cut that airbag. That's probably one of the safest things you can do. Is just go ahead and cut that airbag with a knife, get some sort of hole in it. What that's going to do is if that cylinder discharges, you're just going to have a lot of air come out. Okay, instead of having an airbag come down at you going 200 plus miles an hour. Okay, so that's one quick way that you can mitigate that situation that you may have not thought of before. So, Adam, you got anything about some of these cars that you've dealt with or seen?
EV-wise?
Yeah, or mixed fuels or anything?
Well, first thing, bring it on in a little bit. We're in a trust tree.
He doesn't talk as loud as I do. So.
Or as much. A little more oxygen in my zone. So, really, first thing, what are we doing when we show up on scene initially? What's the very first thing we want to do right through the windshield? Come on, what are we doing? Scene size up, right? So what are some stuff we're looking for, especially nowadays compared to the days of old? That's one of the first things, part of our size up, is looking at types of vehicles now. So we like to teach identify. Is the first thing we're going to do, right? As part of our size up. Identify if it's some type of alternative fuel vehicle. EV, hydrogen fuel vehicle, propane fuel vehicle, anything like that, right? So we're going to identify as part of our size up first, and then move on from there. But what kind of things do you think we can look for on a vehicle to try to identify that it might be an EV type vehicle, electric type vehicle? Badging, nice. Absolutely. So external badging, right? Where do we normally see those on vehicles? Absolutely. So oftentimes you'll see either a single point or a triple point. Single point, where do you think you find single points if you're only going to have one type of badging or one indicator? Typically the trunk, right? And then if it's a 3-point, exactly like he said, you're going to have the trunk and then usually both sides. They can be in different locations, oftentimes that front point. Awesome. From identify, we do our size up, we identify that it's an electric vehicle or some type of alternative fuel vehicle. We want to try to immobilize it. We've always wanted to immobilize previously, right? Try to keep it from rocking back and forth, things of that sort. But if this were an electric vehicle and I were to walk up to it, what does that typically sound like? Quiet, sometimes to the point it's almost nothing at all, right? Even if it's a small sound, what else are we going to hear on typical extrication scenes? Trucks going by, our diesel engine 50 to 100 feet away from us, other trucks responding and sirens going, right? So even if there's a slight noise, we're not necessarily going to hear it. So it may still be on and ready to take off at any point without us realizing it, right? So one of the key things is we don't want to walk up from front and back anymore. We really want to try to start walking up to vehicles at a nice 45 or from the sides, and then start chalking our wheels early, way earlier than ever before. All it takes is for that unconscious person with their foot on the brake because they were hitting the brake right before impact to wake up or move or shift or whatever, and now that foot slips off the brake pedal and that thing comes at us, right? So just something to consider, immobilize early. 4, do they have any vehicles to where, the electric vehicles, to where when they have an impact, they have a sensor on them where they automatically shut themselves down? Yeah, so some vehicles, not all, unfortunately we can never say all when we're talking about vehicle extrication, right? Because every vehicle and manufacturer and models can be a little different. But some of them will have front and rear sensors and side sensors, so when they have an impact or if an airbag gets discharged, they'll automatically cut off the 12-volt system and the high voltage system. Yeah. Not all of them do though. So from there, that's up to us now, so we want to kind of disable it, right? We'll keep moving through some of that as well. Talking to Nick before this, and I told him that basically the more I research this stuff and learn it and take classes and see it, the more I realize there's just no way to know it. There's no similar vehicle, because this might be a 2020 and in 2021 it's going to be completely different, the way they run the wires, where they put their capacitors, the DC to DC converters, all that stuff. So they vary so much. The more I learn, the more I realize that I need to take and invest as a department into one of these apps or programs, because it's just not possible except to learn the generalizations, like don't cut colored wires, don't push off of or pull off of batteries or any of my high voltage system components, and what they look like and how to find them basically. Because there's thousands and thousands of options. There's no way for us to know all of them. It's just not going to happen. So the more you learn, the more you realize you just don't know.
There's kind of one thing that is somewhat generalized, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but it's where the batteries are. That batteries typically are on the bottom of that car in the center, and that's a large portion of them are in a big tray underneath the vehicle. That's where all your weight is.
But you'll even find the electric drive engines. There's not always just one engine. Now you start to see 2, and there's a brand new vehicle getting ready to come out where it actually has 4. There's one on each wheel. So that's what I mean. You can't even isolate it down to, oh, I know there's at least one drive engine. Absolutely not anymore. Maybe 2, maybe 4. So it just is changing so quickly. We can't keep up as a fire service, unfortunately, other than the generalizations and the safety features and trying to find these programs. The way we kind of do the programs is not all of our members or apparatus have them, because it is kind of expensive, but our either specialty pieces or like extrication pieces will have it. And so they can call forward while they're responding to whoever may be on scene first, incident commander or first arriving unit, and just say, hey, what kind of vehicle do you have? Oh, it's a 2022 Subaru Outback. Okay, perfect. Now en route, I can pull up my schematics and go, okay, here's my service disconnect, safety disconnect, 12-volt system. Here's my high-strength steels and metals. Here's, airbags, etc. So that's kind of how we're doing it, to where we can buy just a couple membership fees of the program to keep the cost down a little bit, but still be aggressive and progressive in our extrication stuff.
So we're going to talk about gaining access to inside the vehicle, and then we're going to talk to, I'm going to get Mike to come up here and talk about metals in the front ends of cars and crumple zones and things like that. You good with that one? Sure. Okay. So a couple things about gaining access into cars. I didn't want to break that window out, but a couple. I got this side, but one thing that we can do as far as gaining access to cars, I'm gonna go for it. One thing that we can do about gaining access, you can see a lot of these cars when they're crumpled, they're all different. They've all been in different accidents, right? Some of these are crushed, where we may need to gain access just to get the patient out, but we have no purchase bills. So there's a couple different ways to be able to gain the purchase bills in cars. My personal favorite is what I call a vertical door crush. Okay, a vertical door crush is when I'm taking my spreaders. I'm gonna take my spreaders and I'm gonna put it vertical in the door like this, like so. When I do this, I'm just gonna set my tool in the door, like in the window area. And I'm going to start opening up and pushing into the roof. And when I do that, it's going to push down the vehicle, the door. It's going to basically start elongating, and it's going to create a gap on my A post and create a gap here at the B post around the door. Depending on the type of crash, if you have a side impact and the sole side of the car is pushed in on top of your patient, one of the things we want to do is be able to relieve pressure off that patient if all that door and everything is there. So that same maneuver, I can take my tool and push it up a little bit and do more of a push out, creating my gap, and I'm also pulling the door off the patient at the same time. So there's a couple different ways that we can do that and be able to gain that access. What that also does for me is it creates purchase points, like I talked about, to be able to start peeling the door down. There's a funny saying that I always say when I do extrications, and when I keep a mindset, I always do my extrications like I eat my banana, from the top down. It doesn't matter which way you turn the banana, you're always starting from the top and you're working your way down. If this car is upside down, I'm still going to work from the top of it, but upside down, I'm going to work from the sky down, right, even from here. One of the biggest problems that I see a lot of is you may have a little gap here. You may come in, I can take your spreaders and grab the lift and pull and get in there. The one thing you're going to do every time is you're going to peel back that outer skin. You're going to peel it away. That hurts your structural integrity of your door, and then you're just going to have to keep on working in there. Every once in a blue moon, we get lucky and we'll get in there and get a good bite if we got a good enough gap, and we'll pop it out. Starting from the top down, this door frame right here, right where the window is your strongest part of your car door, right? So what I mean by that is all that metal is rolled together. It's less surface area, so when I get my spreader tips on this, I'm grabbing a lot more metal and not just a lip. This lip, you guys can all see it, there's only about an 1/8 inch piece of metal that's rolled over on this edge right here. So when we grab a hold of that, it just pops it open and it starts skinning the door, okay? So with that being said, when I come in here and grab this, I'm grabbing all that metal and it starts peeling that door down. You start gaining access to your hinges, to your bolts. You also start gaining access to your nadir pin and your latches, okay? Hard push points. When you're doing extrications, hard push points is something you really need to know. If you're not on something hard, depending on the vehicle, you're going to start crushing metal. pushing posts in because they're always damaged. We want to get our spreaders or our cutters, especially our spreaders, like on the bolts. If you're taking a hinge, you want to set your spreaders right on those bolts and push off the bolts. Okay. When you're doing that, you're stretching and popping what you want to break. If you go above it or below it and try to be a hero and try to pop both latches at the same time, and it doesn't always work. Okay, especially if you come at it in the middle. A lot of times you start pushing into A post and go into the cavity of the car. So come up, get on your hard push points on your hinges, and just start popping. When you pop that top one, spread it out a little bit more so you have direct access down to your lower hinge. Okay. There you go, boss. So what I just did is I just took that fender off real quick. So you guys want to gather around this side. We will talk about how these fenders are designed.
That program does batteries and the substrate of the metal, correct?
It does. So it shows where all your high strength, like boron metals and advanced metals are. So all the way up to where it goes through the A post and stops, where it comes down through your rocker panels, all that good stuff. High voltage lines, high voltage batteries, your low voltage batteries, your seatbelt capacitors, and all, I mean anything that might be a danger to us in the fire service, it will show you all of that stuff in a nice, beautiful picture program, basically like a 3D picture.
There's
Awesome.
some of these programs are a little bit more in depth than others. This is just a basic training program that we have or have access to. But there's other programs that you can pay more money for that give you legitimately everything.
So the different substrates on the metals, the boron, the ultra high strength steel, the high strength steel, you have a regular carbon, whatever, aluminum. As he said, with the power on the car, with the battery locations, it varies from year to year. This thing could be a new model for 2 years, and then in 2 years they completely change everything. Ford went aluminum with their exterior body panels. Chevrolet then did so, but the unisides underneath the doors are ultra high strength steel. You can't even fix it. If it just has a quarter size dent in it, you should replace it. These are going to be your crush zones. When we look at when we're assessing the damage on the car, whether it's accident related or it's something that's supposed to be there, the way we look at it is this is machine made. You can tell your crumple zones because they're there so that the energy compresses and doesn't transfer to the passenger compartment. They want it to fold up like an accordion because every piece that bends here transfers energy away from the person who's in it. Most times the National Institute for Highway Safety, they do their 45% offset test. The majority of it is for the driver because most of the time we're in the car by ourselves. You know, like 72% of the time or whatever they say, you're in the car by yourself. So that's why they do that offset test. Honestly, knowing what the metal is made of nowadays, unless you know the car, unless you have something like that, you're never going to know what it's made of because it just varies. Everybody saw the commercials that they did, Chevrolet did with the loader dropping the stuff into the back of the Chevy truck and the back of the Ford truck. And then 2 years later, Chevrolet goes on their exterior body. So you just never know what it's going to be. But all of these formed places, it doesn't look like it does anything, but it absolutely does. They crash hundreds of these cars just to make sure that the guy inside walks away with a little bit of chafing on his face from airbag. And one of the other things, the batteries, they do auxiliary batteries in there too. I call them the SOS systems in the cars.
Yeah.
If it's got, what do they call the Cadillac? OnStar. You'll have little SOS buttons. Even if you've completely taken away all the power in the car, those are on a separate battery. And they're made so if you cream that Hyundai right there has the batteries in pieces. If you cream it and there's no power coming from the car, it can still call emergency services for you without any power. So there's another battery on top of that. A lot of times they're like the size of a motorcycle battery.
Yep.
Certain vehicles, General Motors is like a fusible link. Once it burns, once it powers that battery up, it's done. It has to be replaced, but it's got one way of power. That's it. Can't recharge it. Can't nothing. It's junk afterwards. It's just to get the emergency services to you. Fords, magnesium radiator support. The radiator supports in a lot of the gas trucks, in the diesel trucks, you'll notice that they're almost like a cast. Like they look like cast iron. They're really like porous. But there will be tabs riveted to the side of them and then welded to the truck. That's magnesium. Creates its own oxygen in the body. There's that phosphorus. Anyway, when it starts burning, you can't put it out. Like I've seen guys like, oh, I'm gonna weld. No, you're not.
Why would they use that, Mike? Hey, Mike, why would they use a material like that when it creates a hazard like that? Do you know why they would use that?
Cheap and light.
What?
Cheap, light, strength.
Okay.
So for them, it's strong,
but it's
how
light.
much it weighs, and for them, cost, right? If they can lower their bottom dollar,
Got it.
now
if
they make
don't
more
get
profit.
under a certain MPG, then they have to charge gas guzzler tax.
Got it.
So price of the vehicle.
Yeah. Okay.
One thing when I'm moving anything that has a deployed airbag, the first thing I look for on our side is blood, biohazards inside. And I mean, you get drunk drivers that after they get into the wreck and it's all over. I don't even know. So yesterday when I was towing these around, I was like, I had a helper with me and I said, check every one when we get in. Just make sure you look at the airbag, make sure there's no blood on it or anything like that. If there is, we'll get gloves. We'll cut the bag out of it that way. No big deal. But I'm more than confident that everybody that was in any of these cars walked away. So it is amazing. I've actually been lucky enough to go to the National Institute for Highway Safety and watch them wreck an accident. Just slam it into a big block of concrete. And it's amazing. It comes underneath the runway. Yep. You're on a catwalk over top of it. There's the most horrible sound you've ever heard because everything's quiet. And then here comes the car, that factory's engineers out there with notepads and they're grabbing computer equipment that they have the car rigged with. I mean, that car's unrepairable at 45 miles an hour.
So before, if we had to lift this dash or roll this dash, we'll come in and make our cuts on our lower A post, right? We'll probably get a real big deep cut, maybe take a V, take a chunk out and get another bite maybe. But on older cars, we're ripping and tearing metal, right? On the newer metals, we're fracturing metals now with the boron steels, the different megapascal steels, or levels of steel from high strength to ultra high strength. It goes from 650 megapascal steel up to 15 to 1800. So the difference in that, I'm going to scoot over here real quick and I'm going to get back into my point. I can't remember what vehicle this was off of that cut it. This was off of a 2000 and, I think this was a 2018 Mercedes. So this is a mid high strength steel car, right? It's probably 1100 to 1400, maybe a little bit less. The difference with this one is this one has multiple layers, right? But you see how I crushed it, okay? But it's strong enough when I put my spreaders on there that it tore through the skin and it didn't bite in, okay? So when I crush them to cut, it creates one big bar, if you will, right? So it's strong, but there's multiple layers and it's super heavy. Boron, when you put boron in the different amounts, boron's like a powder, and then they create all sorts of other chemical balances and everything from boron. But the different levels of boron in it gives it the strength. This is a vehicle It has one layer of boron in it, but it's a higher strength. It's an ultra high strength steel. So in that 1500 plus range, right, of the steel, and that has to do with pressure and how it's made and everything. But when I cut this, I came at this and cut this, it fractured the metal, and you can see the post pretty much stayed the same shape it was when I cut it off the car. Okay, so when I created, my cutters wrapped around it, and I created force, and it basically just fractured and popped it. Okay, whereas that one I crushed and popped. Okay, so different levels of metal, different ways that they react. Okay, this is going to be a lot harder to cut because you have to have a really big mouth to be able to get through it. Okay, so to get back to my point, these firewalls is where a lot of your high strength steel is, because they're designed to protect your patient. So this may be all crumpled, right? So we may no longer have to make a cut here because this is all gone. But this is going to stay true a lot of times. It may get pushed in, but it's still together. It's still strong, even though it's pushed. There's a weld seam or a rolled seam in here. Either it's flat and pushed together or it's rolled over. That separates the inner fender wall and firewall and the A-post. When we make our cuts, and it's on a new car, if you really need to get that up, you need to cut deep and make sure you get into that fender well and cut that seam. Okay, that's one thing I like to do. If it's still there, like a lot of these cars still have our fenders here, or part of it, spread that fender off. When you take the door off, take a couple seconds and take that fender and peel it off. So that way you don't have anything obstructing your vision on what you're seeing and what you're cutting and how deep you're cutting. It's just one less thing out of your way. Okay. When we make that complete cut and get in there, our dash rolls and dash lifts become a lot easier. Now we can create that force, and we have that advantage to be able to start ripping that inner fender and firewall to get it to move to where we need to get our patients out. Adam, what are the different places where you've seen wires ran through these A-posts, cars, go from the battery to the motor?
So, like everything else, unfortunately, they all are run different places. One of the main places you'll see them is run up through the rocker rails or rocker panels, right? So it changes the way we use those. That's oftentimes what we push off of for like a dash lift or dash roll, right? We need to be careful if it's an electric vehicle and understand if we may have the high voltage lines in there, because if we start pushing off of that and crushing that rocker rail, we can crush that electric high voltage line, which is going to create a lot of issues for us. The other issue it can create is basically just rock. So where do we say a lot of times the batteries are running the vehicles? The floor pan, right? It's like a skateboard style, what they call a skateboard style battery system. It's the entire underside of the vehicle, basically. Well, if we're pushing that much pressure with our rams on these rocker rails, sometimes that can take and tweak those batteries, and they do not like mechanical damage like that. And so it typically won't puncture them, and it won't be an acute issue for us, but oftentimes it will start to fail the battery internally, and we won't know it while we're there on scene. But hours, days, and sometimes they've had even up to weeks later, that battery will start to off gas internally, end up rupturing and creating a fire issue for them. So we have to be really careful now with EVs, what we do with our rocker rails. Sometimes they'll run directly under the vehicle, kind of the center of the vehicle, if you will. But where you'll see them oftentimes, like I said, the rocker rails, and then they'll come up through this A-post and run in through the firewall. So also need to be careful with EVs on our A-posts, right? So exactly what Nick was saying, automatically on an electric vehicle, we want to pop this front panel off if we're going to do anything to this front quarter panel. We also don't want to just come up in that old style, come up and crush to make a gap for the door if it's an electric vehicle, because same thing, we've got our high voltage lines, and we've got oftentimes for many makes and models our charging systems, the DC to DC converters, the inverter converters. A lot of that stuff is kept right in the wheel well, so we don't want to come up and crush that. Again, that's a high voltage component. We don't want to crush it, push off of it, puncture it, anything like that. So automatically want to pull this front fender off, make sure we're not dealing with any type of high voltage components, And then start looking for our high voltage lines before making any cuts or pushes or anything like that.
That makes it even more important to what I talked about before, getting this door off, is your hard push points. When you push off your bolts and your hinges, you want to spread your hinges apart. If you take your spreader and you go in between the two hinges, right here where you have a wiring hole where it's weaker, then you start spreading into that, then you have resistance because you got two hinges that are still intact. Now you're starting to push that A post in, right? And you're going to push into that wiring system if it's in there, right? That high voltage wiring. So take these doors off by the hinges, up on the hinges, or if not, cut them. When you cut them, come down on top of them, make sure you get all the way around them. So it sucks it in, grabs it, and sucks it into the throat of the tool where it's the strongest. Don't care the manufacturer, right? You want to suck it in and get it close to the back of the tool. When you get in there, you got those wiring holes. The grommet holes are usually littered on A posts, depending on the manufacturer. You can pop those off to help see inside the A posts to see if there's wiring there, if they're not labeled, or if you don't know.
Last thing I'll mention is we also, so front fender we like to take off, and we also like to take off the hood pretty early. Same thing, just it'll give us indications if it's an electric vehicle. Oftentimes that 12-volt system's there, our safety disconnects, everything important to us is under the hood. But how do hoods change now compared to what they were 5, 10, 20 years ago? How did they work mechanically before to pop the hood? A cable, an actual cable, right? How are all the new vehicles made that way? Or what's another mechanism you'll see now?
Electrically actuated.
An electric, exactly, it's electrically driven. So oftentimes when the front end gets damaged, now we're not going to be able to access that. Or if that 12-volt system gets damaged and if that gets damaged at all, now we don't have the electrical system for the hood to work anymore, right? So what is an option for us to get into the hood to get the hood off to make access to it? Absolutely. So you'll see a lot of guys that like to come through with like a rotary saw, K12, however you choose to call it, and make a cut all the way across. We really want to try to get away from that with newer vehicles because, again, we've got all of our high energy components in here, our DC to DC converters, all that good stuff. So we do not want to cut through one of those, right? The easiest way is if we've got our E-tools, that's great, or we can just use a Halligan, make access, cut our hinges, both sides, one on each side, and take and twist this hood, and it turns into a giant lever force. There's massive amounts of mechanical advantage, and we can just take and twist this thing right off, and it'll pop it in 2 seconds with very little energy. So that's kind of more of our preferred method, is either cut with E-tools or cut with Sawzalls, and twist this thing around and remove it, and not cut through the entire hood anymore with rotary saws.
If you have your spreaders or anything, if you have your spreaders in hand and you need to get into it, you can slide this in between the wheel, inside the window and the fender. There's always a gap. On all the vehicles, there's a gap there. We can take that and open that right on up. Okay? And we're getting that hood up and gaining access to that latch to be able to cut, or you can keep on spreading this it started ripping. But it gives you that access, okay, to be able to get in there. So a couple different things that we can do. We can still use that rocker panel, but we have to use some accessories, if you will, to be able to spread out that surface area. So we're going to use our steps that we have. You have your steps for your rocker panels, pushes up against your B post, right, to be able to push off of. Hurst has this quick kick. It's nice because it rocks in and it locks in and it spreads out that surface area. I use that a lot. It's really nice. To turn these on and off, there's a button. Well, you guys can see this. There's an on-off button right here. It's lit up blue. Okay? You're going to press and hold it. It's going to turn off. Press and hold it for a second, and it's going to turn itself on. Okay? Your start grip. It's got pictures on the front. Right is to open. Left is to close. Okay. This light over here on the side is your power. That's what your battery level is. Okay. There's a green buttons on or lights on the left. That's how much power you're using. It has 2 stages. So you'll see it in the first stage as we're operating it, and then it'll go to the second stage and you start building pressure. Okay. When you start cutting, these are going to be some higher strength metal, these higher strength cars. So like this cutter is the smallest cutter I have. It may not cut some of this stuff. It may overpower it. But when you start cutting, you're going to start just building pressure. Hear that sound right there? That's our relief. Okay. This tool is going to run and build pressure until you hit that. Okay. That's letting you know that that tool is giving you everything it's got. Okay. So keep cutting until you hear that. Okay. Another thing these tools do, if you start cutting and your tool rolls one way or the other, 15 degrees one way or the other, that's called blade roll or tool roll. What happens with that is that when you start rolling and you get something really hard in between, it starts separating the blade. And you have a high possibility of doing damage to the tool or snapping a blade. These cutters, all these except that one, the on off switch will turn red to let you know that you've done that. But it's not going to shut off. It's just an indicator, okay? So, watch your tool swing also if you're cutting a post. With these cutters, I prefer to come at a post head on. What that does is that keeps me from swinging the tool inside the cavity of the compartment, okay? I don't care what manufacturer it is or what tool it is. If you come at a post parallel this way, that's the one thing we fight all the time, is that tool swinging into the cavity of the compartment. Does anybody disagree? Do you know why it does that? Exactly. What's the path of least resistance? Well, what's not having you resistant? Right. So the inside of your post is pretty much all empty, right? So you got 3 or 4 inches of empty space that the inside of their blade is going to start making progress, and your outside blade is not, because all your hard steel is on the outside. So that outside blade's not making progress. I mentioned before, all these vehicles have wiring holes, black grommets or holes on the outside of your A-post. If you're running into problems and you're having to cut a post parallel, stick your outside blade inside of one of those holes. Okay? You may have to angle it up a little bit, or you may have to make a little bit different of a cut. But if you stick that outside blade inside that hole, your blade's going to have a chance to start making progress, and your tool's not going to migrate inside the cavity of the car where your patient is. Okay? All right. Well, all 3 of us will go over that if you guys have questions when it comes to that. All right, to operate, you have a star grip. You can operate this with one finger anywhere you go. If it starts swinging in somewhere, just move your hand, get it out of its way, okay? Everybody's going to get a car or more to cut up. I like to hold my tools like this, okay? Sometimes if I'm going to be lower, I'll go ahead and carry them traditionally kind of like this, but I operate everything like from my chest line down, okay? I don't like to go any higher if I don't have to. Whatever hand I'm comfortable with controlling, I'm going to grab the handle with like this. I'm going to take my other hand, I'm going to go underneath the tool and grab the handle. I'm going to bring it close to me. If you have your cutters, the same way. It gets the tool up here. If I need to put it on there, I'm going to roll it down. I'm going to operate the tool. If I need to make a cut, I'm already up here, up high to make a cut. Okay? It's a lot easier to control it and do it here. I'm vertically challenged, but I still don't like to do a trap workout every time I need to use the tools. Okay? So I keep it up high. All right? Make sense? Controls are right here. Look at me in the face. I'm good to go. Once you get the tool tight, or you get it out of the way, you can move this hand and get it out of the way. Okay? I'm going to push it into the root. Okay? When I start opening it up, see what happens? I start making a gap. It pulls the door away from the patient. I got all sorts of gaps. Okay? I just created a lot of gap here. This is what I mean by gaps. I'm going to stick my tool right there. Okay, I'm gonna open up. Started slipping on the plastic. I'm gonna sink it in a little bit deeper. See how that tool's staying? I can start looking at my latch. It's starting to separate. I've grabbed all that metal, okay? Any car up high, you grab a metal. You're creating your V. It's gonna start to slip, but everybody can, if you come over here and look, I've created so much space right here for the latch. I close my tool and I go vertical with it. I can sit here and hold it just like this. I can hold it like this. And I just start opening it. It just pops the door. It's all good. Super simple. Start from your top and work your way down. Okay? Your hinges, the same way. You can come at it this way, or you can come at it that way. Okay? You may have to work it. A little bit like that. It's going to swing shut. You can legitimately just set the tool down on top of the hinge. So also on some cars, there's QR readers. That one doesn't help us out much. Not to bang on the Ford guy.
That's all right.
But there are some manufacturers that have the QR readers inside the gas caps or on the driver's door. You take your phone, scan that QR reader, it actually pops up all this information. It gives you everything you need to know about that car just by scanning that QR reader. Mercedes is big about it. Okay, so when I get to this point, I'm on the hinge right here. I know you guys are over there, you can't really see it, but I'm only on that hinge. I'm gonna pop it. Come in here, pop it. The safety latch. All right. There we go. This is the wiring holes I'm talking about. You got a big one right here, and you got another one right here. You get that door off. Once you get it off, now you can look inside that A-post to see if that high voltage wire, see if that stuff's in there. You can put your cutter tips in there to help making a cut. Once you make this cut, then you can stick your other blade in here and wrap it around and finish cutting inside the fender. Okay? Use those to your advantage. Okay? One other thing that we need to know about, that'll make you a better, doing extrication better, is the dash supports. Okay? This bar right here, this is the best $30 knife I ever bought. See this bar right here, this support system? That's in every vehicle, unless you get like 90s or newer. Okay, some form or fashion, this is here. It connects from A-post to A-post. Okay, if you come in here and hit this, it's going to push that dash as long as it's not broken up. Okay, I do a lot of my dash pushes and lifts by hitting that bar now. It makes it very helpful and user-friendly. It's always there in some shape or form, shape or fashion. You have to come in here and crush it, come right up on the A-post, and come in there and hit that. You use it with your spreaders, you can grab it with your ram, whole 9 yards.
You know, as you approach the vehicle, what are we looking for? We're looking for the badging. And what are these kids doing these days? They're taking everything off. They're just kids. Kids my age, right? They're taking the badging off, so you're like, it looks like a fill in the blank. Some are pretty obvious. Even if it's a Tesla, they're taking everything off. They're pretty obvious because you got the one little Tesla thing, but you know that would be a electric NEV. Okay, so size it up before you get there. I always call it the 3 S's: seeing safety, seeing stability, and seeing sanity. Safety is, what am I coming up to? Before I even get off the rig, what am I coming up to? What are the weather conditions? Am I on the interstate? Is the PD here? Is the lane open? People in the car? Are they in the car? Is there a river next to you that we got flooding and that water was about 6 inches below and now it's up to, now it was there, now it's up to here. In the sales pitch, these tools are good down to fresh water and salt water to 11 feet. I'm going to throw in a couple things just because it's just the nature of the game, right? So be aware of the scene, your scene safety before you even get there. And everybody on the scene has got a job. Somebody's peeking and prying. Somebody's checking. Your EMS people, your paramedics, they're going to be doing patient care. You've got to be aware of that. So you're there. The person behind you who's dying to get that tool in their hand, don't ever put a tool on the ground, just leave it because you know what happens to that. What happens when you leave a tool on the ground? That's right. Or what? You trip over trying to get somebody out. Don't even throw them on the ground. But the person behind you is what? Maybe they got an extra battery in their hand. Maybe they brought the tool bag that's got all the tools to what? Pry, feet, cover windshield. You got a crowbar. You got anything. You got anything tool that you're going to bring with you. Scene stability. And I'm just touching on just a quick one. Scene stability. That's, is it chopped? Is the car off? Did you get the key fob out? Did you turn it off? I can't hear them anymore. Is it still energized? Someone's checking the battery, right? We want to stand directly in front of the car when we're doing this. I advise not to. I say take the 45 and get your hood open. Find the battery. Might not be there, as Nick was pointing out. So what do we have? We have this great little system. This is the Nabc system he was having. If you haven't had a chance to look at this, it's a great system. There are others out there. This one's nice. If this was your tablet, you could have the person who's doing scene safety with you. The second person say, hey, the battery's under the front right seat. It's in the back. This is a hybrid. They got hard car parts here. Oh, yellow, battery, sensor, electrical. The airbags are all deployed. You sure? It's a D airbag, not deployed yet. There's a sensor that's underneath in the center of the dash. I'm sitting in the driver's seat, right down here, in front of that, right along that transmission off. There's a sensor box about this big. There were some guys in Dayton, Ohio, who were spreading off the dash on, trying to get that dash up. They hit that box, and safety restraint system. It activated, blew the bags. No one's as strong as here tonight. Just be aware of things. Nick was talking about and I actually marked it over there just a minute. Where are the airbag cylinders? Usually right along that side, right down that back of that seat post, back in the area. Not that long. But they run, they'll stretch all over the side. That side, you're far. You don't want to cut that cylinder.
Have more push-ups, right? Making this cut here helps out too. Sometimes if you just need to get a couple inches and this doesn't work, you make that cut and don't cut here, you can lift up as well. Usually this is going to be crushed or bent anyways. We're just going to push it back. Okay. This is a good maneuver. That's it. These cars are new to me too. So. See how I'm bending it? I'm on that bar now. Broke it free. I actually broke the bar in this car, but it lifted the dash up. Now I gained the access that I need to hopefully get the patient out. If they're trapped, you see that they're feet are actually pinned and entangled, it's a whole different situation. This may not be the way that we go. Okay. All right. Let's go to the other side of the car. You guys are going to use these tools and get this stuff done.
It works awesome because it gives you a huge gap and just starts the process of extrication anyway.
Yeah, we've never done it that way. That's why I'm gonna try it. We usually try to fry and just get it done.
The other way you'll see is some guys like to come in and instead of coming this way, they'll just squeeze the door. I would recommend the way you did it though. Yeah.
Well, then, like, it kind of keeps it away from the base.
Exactly. If it's a T-bone and they've got some intrusion into them, if I take and squeeze this, where does the energy want to go? The energy, where's the door want to go? It kind of tacos and it pushes the more energy in on the impingement, right? Whereas the way you did it, exactly, it pulls all the door away from it. And it just gives you a much better gap and starts that process. Drop one. Or if we have to, come in with a cutter and just cut the thing.
Go for it, Kevin. I'm going to the front. Thank you, God.
Hard metal. Good?
So I'll show the
Now we can kind of see this again, so we're going to try to work that. If we can't, then we're going to get our cutters in there. Grab a cutter. We're just gonna. Sometimes too, old friend of mine taught me a trick. He'll keep like a stress ball in his pocket sometimes, and on these doors, if you go to the hinge first, he'll take the stress ball and put it inside the door hinge, and he'll keep it pressed out. So while he's working, if it that last right, it'll open that up. So there take that off, I'll get my gap in the bottom of the door. I'll start opening it up. It'll open up to the hinge, and it'll start. You can start prying open and getting to the latch every time.
cut that post head off. So with these cutters, we're going to cut this entire post in one cut. Everything we need to do. So you're going to hear how strong these guys are. It's going to start breaking through the layers. Hear it? We're building pressure. We're fracturing the layers of metal. There's another one in there. And watch the dash. What happened to that dash when he finished? It lifted up a little bit. We just cut that entire post in one cut. Now the ram cutter, somebody's going to make a cut right here.
So if you want to come in here, you can cut the same post.
All right. It goes in and out of the faster speed. Yep. Perfect.
All the way. Nice. Come in there and get the biggest stuff you can head on.
All right, your spreader's ready to go. Get your spreader. You're always right behind it with that tool on the ground, sitting down. Get it? What we got left? There you go. You might be able to come in on this side. You might have to come in from this side because the EMS people are almost, they're ready to do their thing. Okay? Let's just try it. Come in on this side. Let's go. Maybe that's the only side you can get to. It's a little tougher. Then you have to work your way down. Right above the hinge. Stay on it. Okay?
Drop it down. Close. There you go. Stop. So you'll learn to look as you go. Keep closing. You're good. Keep closing. Leave it right where you had it. See what I'm looking at right here? See this flat? I'm trying to get you in there as deep as you can. Now you can just kind of open slowly. You can gingerly do this. Yeah. All right, stop. See how plastic is? Lift up a little bit. Remember I told you plastic will make you look like a fool? Open. Now put it back in the hole. Yep. Yep. Oh, it's right there. He wants to go. Got a turn like this? Okay. Keep going. Hit that right there. Alright, so got this up. So we're going to show you guys a way to lay down the side of a car. I'm going to talk about it, and then Adam and I are going to do it so you can see how it works. Granted, this is a little bit different because this has not been crushed in. The other side's crushed, but it's not crushed in. It's just kind of skin, right? So a lot of times we saw that the metal's super hard. And we saw, my group saw how the bottom of that B-post was not that strong, but the upper B-post was. So in a side impact, what's going to happen a lot of times is the bottom of that car is going to get pushed into the cavity where the patient is. And T-bones, a lot of times will get impingements with hands, feet, in between the rocker panel on the seat, a hand and the rocker panel on the seat, or something like that. So doing a maneuver like we call it a bat wing or a side out, we'll come in this way, make our cut, and we'll basically open the whole side of the car up and hinge it out after we take this door off. But when doing that, you'll find that a lot of times you'll have that impingement sometimes. So what we started doing, and it's a way to do it, is to basically take this whole side and lay it to the ground. If you do it right, you can do it in about 2.5 minutes. Okay? So a couple things need to happen. Depends on how bad the crush is in. If the crush is super bad in, we have to get this coming out this way. So you can do that a couple ways. Come along, winch, right? You can pull up to the car, wrap around the bottom of it, just pull tension, and then we're going to come up here and make this cut right here. Your first cut, your first thing that you're going to do when you start done everything to get to your extrication is you're going to cut the top of your B-post. What that's going to do is going to basically relieve the whole, this part of the car. And this is going to be tensioned or tight. And then when you start cutting here, and this is finished, you're going to pull tension this way and start getting this part of the car coming this way. You don't want to pull a lot. We're not trying to pull the vehicle. We're just trying to get relief off the patient, right? So when we start doing that, our second thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our ram. We're going to go from the roof to our B-post at a diagonal. We talked about path of least resistance, right? A lot. That's what we use that in our advantage. So when we start creating force from here to here, like this, when we start extending, this is cut. The ram is going to start turning. This part of the car is going to start rolling out. Then two things are going to start happening at that point. This gap is going to start being created, and the hinges are going to start being created. So this is where your second or third person comes in handy. That person is going to take their spreaders and start spreading this gap and helping the ram. He or she's going to start spreading down, popping these hinges. As those hinges start popping, now you got it going in the direction. This push is going to become a lot weaker and a lot easier for the ram. This may just blow by itself. Maybe not even have to worry about it, right? It may just happen by itself. So once you start going, they start going there, your ram's going to start maxing out. So you're going to want to close
and just work your ram from here to here to here, and you're going to be almost vertical with your B post, and your ram's going to take place of your B post. You're going to push the entire door and side of the car down. What's going to happen, once you cut here, you're going to take these and kind of peel them out of the way. Your cutter guy can start cutting these, and so they're not tripping anybody up. But what's nice about this is it takes the rocker panel and everything, and it rolls it away from the patient. It basically opens that gap up. It releases all of that. Now you may have to work over the doors or whatnot, but it's a quick, easy way to get access to the patients, and it's very quick. So, especially with battery power tools, they're a little bit longer. Sometimes making this cut in here, we talked about it being harder metal, right? And the tool swinging. We're coming in parallel with the bottom of that V-post cut, and we're hitting a lot of hard metal down there. So it's likely that it's going to want to swing into the car. So that's another reason why this works well with these. Anybody have any questions? No? What do you want to do? You want a cutter and ram, or you want a spreader?
I'll cutter and spreader.
The cutter spreader?
Yeah,
and I'll ram?
Yeah.
I'll go right ahead. You know when plans don't go as planned?
You're good down here. Still ain't getting a whole lot. All your meters are done.
No, safety spreader. Sometimes new cars are okay, dude, because they have You're not out of your office. That's the idea of that is to show how that rocker panel pulls it all away. It took us a while to get it to bite and get it to come this way. If that would have been crushed at all, we wouldn't have had to make our own bowls and seams in it, and it would have been a lot easier. Does that make sense? Sorry it didn't go as smoothly as planned. How you doing? I'll get out of the office. You should be able to let go. You should be able to control it. You got your sputter. You're ready.
probably start getting it back. All around.
Be able to come in now, still not given.
You're doing nothing but helping him. See how it lasts much or That's something a whole lot different about these newer metals. They don't stay down. You got to overextend it. So you separate it, it pops. This is also. Still getting dressed.
But you make lights come in here and open them up, it'll start blowing the door out. There you go. Keep going? Keep going? Yeah, you can keep going. Let the whole throw out of it. Now just looking at it, probably going to be easier to attack from this side because we have more of a gap. So if you come in here, kind of at this angle. There you go. Spin them. There you go. Oh. Nice. Keep the right against that hinge. There you go. Nice. There you go. Keep going. All right. Now close it up and drop it down in part. You want to try to make that second bottom hinge.
Was this Nick on this one?
There you go. Drop it right down here on top of that hinge, just like you did before. There you go. A little farther, try to hit that bolt. Beautiful. Perfect. So now you can come in here, and then we'll, if you want to switch out, we'll let the other gentleman come in kind of up and try to dig down into that latch.
Ready.
He's ready to go. Keep working your way down.
Time you use up the holes, we're good.
Nice. Nice. Good work.
Dang.
You're in the wrong man.
that car. With that man with it.
Thank you everyone for coming to our extrication event. By far, from survey-wise, they said it was the best one that they've ever been to. I'm very proud that Elite hosted it, and thank you.
Get stuff. Get stuff.